Hello and welcome back to TRU Talks. It's Chris Eel in the hosting chair today. Hope everyone is well and good, and I hope everyone enjoyed our TRU Talks episodes last week with Ross Neal and Guy Thompson. There's a lot more that's going to be coming from Guy Thompson in particular, as he's our new columnist going forward on the website. So we're massively excited about that going forward. But another person who is featured on Talking Rugby Union in the last couple of years or so is London Irish legend Topsy Ojo, who kindly joins us this afternoon. And Topsy, welcome along. And first and foremost, I was going to ask you about how retirement has been for you kind of over the last 12 months, but I bet you couldn't have imagined how things have panned out.
Yeah, I'd say, well, firstly, thanks for having me. Yeah, up until March, probably going better than I could have expected in terms of coaching, in terms of media work, in how the stadium was progressing with London Irish. Yeah, everything was moving along really well and, really making some inroads. And then coronavirus hits, and the last 13, 14 weeks has been very, very quiet. So yeah, an interesting year to say the least. But, I guess nobody ever saw it coming, unprecedented. I'd like to think that obviously the work that I'd done pre that, hopefully all in good stead and sets me up for a good place for when obviously rugby and sports coaching and that resumes.
Yeah, you mentioned kind of the work that you planned ahead for retirement, Topsy, and you said when we spoke last year, you spoke about how important it was for you to focus on that. So has that made your transition slightly easier, do you think, despite obviously all the COVID-19 stuff?
Yeah, 100%, I would say so. I mean, it is still very much an unknown, and kind of until you're in it and dealing with it, and you learn so much this first year and speaking to other people the first couple of years out. But looking back now, I've no doubt that kind of the work that I did in the build up, from media perspective, going out and speaking to execs, to producers, trying to get my foot in the door, getting my coaching qualifications, sending out emails, contacting directors of rugby, seeing who needs coaching, are there availabilities. That kind of all put me in a good position to effectively say, right, okay, I am in a position where I'm ready to walk away from the game. And again, like I said, it's up until March, it was all quite smooth and it all gone really well. Obviously, the London Irish position was fortunate enough, but I guess, there was kind of a mutual beneficial relationship in me moving into this ambassador position, helping with the stadium. And that in turn has been a blessing too.
Yeah, and you mentioned the ambassadorial role you've got with the club, Topsy, and I know obviously the stadium has been a massive part of that, but you've been out obviously during the COVID-19 crisis, helping the NHS as well. So has that been nice as well to keep connected with the club and sort of offer your support, whether it's off the pitch or on the pitch?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was huge, and for myself, for all the players as well, even the off-field staff, it was when you sat at home and there's only a few things you can do. Being able to get out and volunteer was one of them. So to be able to do a day doing that was brilliant. And I know all the players that took part in it, the staff as well. I mean, there's so many brilliant people at the club, at Hazelwood in particular, who were like the driving force behind it. From Ed Crossan to Bogdan, our chef, Fiona, some really brilliant people behind the scenes that were driving this thing. So to do a small bit was brilliant.
Yeah, and I guess as well in your role, Topsy, that you do focus on those issues that matter. And obviously COVID-19 is an issue which has affected so many people over the last few months. And another issue which has been prominent in society at the moment as well, Topsy, is the Black Lives Matter movement. And I know you featured on Sky Sports' podcast last week with Will Greenwood, Maggie Alfonsi and Mike Wedderburn of Sky Sports News. And before we sort of get into your chat with those guys, I mean, first and foremost, do you kind of feel over the last few weeks that this Black Lives Matters movement can really be sustained? Because you said on the podcast, Topsy, that enough is enough now. And I guess we've seen so many different movements like this, and people may say they've ticked a box and things have changed, but it seems like this Black Lives Matter movement could really be the kickstart that everyone's been needed, really.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I hope so. And you've probably touched on it there, with a lot of movements and things that spark, it's sustaining them and keeping them consistent. It's not okay, we've kind of checked it now. I guess we won't really know the answer for probably another 3 months, 6 months time to see what changes have really been made, what progress has actually been made, to know if this was just another flash in a pan, it was just words and there was actually no action behind it. The initial response these first 3-4 weeks leads me to believe that this time it will be different. I think there's just so many more voices, not just black voices, white voices as well. Everybody is in support of this now. So that gives me more hope that this is something that will be sustained.
And you mentioned the different voices there, Topsy, that are expressing this message. And if you use football as an example, you've got the likes of Marcus Rashford and Raheem Sterling really promoting the message, but you've got guys like Liverpool captain Jordan Henderson as well. So is it all about the collectiveness with this as well? It's not just black people saying it or white people saying it. Everyone has to be behind this to make a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think maybe that's a misconception sometimes. It's just about black people. It's not. We're all involved in this. It's from us speaking up who have maybe been affected by it to others speaking up saying, actually, even though we've not directly been affected, we're not going to stand for it because it's unfair. Baseline, we're talking about equality and injustice, which really is something that everybody can get behind. So I think to really get to the root of the problem, it can't just be a black issue. It's white. It's everybody's issue, and with the changes we're trying to make, it takes us all to kind of look around us and to see, okay, I've not been aware of it before. I am now. Where are these instances happening and where can I be a part of really affecting change? And people will answer that question in different ways. It might be a small thing, it might be a big thing, but I think as long as we're all collectively doing something and pushing in that direction, then we'll get to that stage where equality is there and it's seen and it's visible and it becomes part of everyday society.
And on the podcast, Topsy, you were quite, and I think all three of you, including Will in this, that you were quite adamant that to get past this problem, you need to educate people. And you said around, obviously, Swing Low and Sweet Chariot was the main basis of the podcast, but you said, well, we need to start educating people from a really young age. So does this kind of sort of a negative issue, it needs to be turned into a positive? Is this kind of a positive thing that you are able to discuss these things and educate people more about these kind of topics?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say that's one of the biggest positives so far because we're having conversations that we never would normally have. We wouldn't discuss it because it's uncomfortable. It's one of those, I don't really want to talk about it. It doesn't affect me. And actually, I think people are welcome to learning more. I mean, me personally, I said it on the pod, the amount that I've learned in the last 3 or 4 weeks, in terms of black history, in terms of other people's experiences, in terms of a collective mindset of, okay, how do we push forward? I think it's been huge. And, I think that is the way we push forward with this thing. I think, I myself, I always look at myself first, not whether it's being blind to it or again, maybe not wanting to go there because it's easier not to. I think that's been a big thing as well, but we're talking about the response now. It's like, no, now we don't have to we shouldn't do that anymore. It is about speaking up. So in terms of education, I think the more that we can learn, whether that's from a young age, of course, but even now, people in senior positions, executive positions, any position where you might potentially either be impacted by it or see it, we're now in a society, hopefully, where we're saying now you've got to call it out. We've got to learn more. We've got to put a stop to it and progressively move to a place where things are a lot more equal.
Yeah, and I guess it will filter into rugby hopefully as well, Topsy. And in terms of sort of young coaches and young players coming into the game, it is vital now, isn't it, that they understand, that this is such an important message that needs to be told.
Yeah, I think so, because, if we're talking about rugby as a whole now, you're talking about the future of a game. You want future participants, future young kids coming through, making the game accessible to all. So obviously Swing Low, it was a big debate, but in the grand scheme of things, it was kind of a minor part of this whole look in this review into diversity and inclusion in rugby. So you're kind of looking now, okay, how does this impact the wider game? And we're talking about, okay, the England men's team up to 30% representation at the World Cup. How do we sustain that? A lot of those guys maybe started in state schools, but maybe ended up private. Do they have to do that? Is there a way to sustain that through state schools? Is it that maybe state school kids don't know enough about the history, or they do see rugby at the top end? Obviously not this current group, but generally speaking, as a predominantly white sport, a white team, or a private school sport, that they're not really keen to explore it. And I know Project Rugby and there's initiatives to do that, but ultimately maybe there needs to be a greater connection in terms of saying, right, actually, this is a sport for all. Okay, we're not just on the field, we're off the field as well. We're now in coaching positions, we're now in executive positions. So obviously we want more people playing, but we want more people coaching as well. You don't essentially have to play to coach. You know, you can still go that route as well. People come onto the board in different ways. So there's a whole kind of different variety of ways into the game. We just want to make sure that everybody's involved in that, and the discussions we're having is a big part of that.
Yeah, and just kind of finally on the subject, Topsy, and it's probably a difficult one for you to answer really, but do you think kind of educating people is the start point of all of this? You can have everyone talking about it on social media and, you know, taking the knee in sports, but to start properly with this, you have to continue educating people with it.
Yeah, it's a big part. I'd probably say the first part is actually just accepting that it is an issue. I think, again, when with change that's this big, you're ultimately going to be met with a lot of resistance. You know, a lot of, oh, it's not that big a deal, or, you know, I don't see it, I've never seen it, I've never been experienced to it, you've never said anything. And, you know, I think before we can then get people to a point where they're listening to the conversation, they have to accept that it is in society. You know, like, you know, take a step back, think seriously, look around you, speak to your friends, your close circle, and see what's going on and accept that it is an issue. And then we can start talking about, okay, what are your experiences? What have you seen? And for a lot of it, like I say, it's because of how long it's been going on. It is very unconscious. It goes on without even thinking about it, without even saying anything. It's just there. So we need to accept that it's there, and then, okay, now we can start moving. What are the conversations that need to be had? And then how can we learn from that so that going forwards, we're in a much better place?
Yeah, because you said, I think, right at the end of the podcast, Topsy, that the time for silence has come to an end, and I'm pretty sure that's probably echoed in what you just said.
Yeah. And again, I'm speaking to loads of people. I mean, listening to, I think it was the BBC pod with Danny Kerr saying, you know, he's been best friends with Ugo for a lifetime and didn't have a clue. Because for a lifetime, we just get on with it. You know, it's easier to just get on with it, to have thick skin, and rather than to make an issue. But I think now everybody recognizes that we shouldn't have to do that. You know, it's unhealthy and it's unfair.
Absolutely, Topsy. Well, hopefully the Black Lives Matter movement is the start of change, and a much needed change in society as well. And Topsy, just to bring it back to yourself to finish off with, you mentioned kind of the projects that you've been working on, obviously the stadium stuff, and also your coaching as well. And when we spoke previously, you were doing bits and bobs for London Irish Wild Geese. So how much have you enjoyed the coaching side of it as well after stepping out from playing?
Yeah, it's been really good. Really enjoyed it. I mean, results, not getting the results, probably the life of a coach. But I mean, I've knew before, talking about the transition, that I enjoyed the coaching environment and being able to work with players to kind of help them develop, to kind of put something out on a pitch at a weekend. Like, I've thoroughly enjoyed the last couple of years, kind of cutting my teeth in the coaching world and progressing. So. Yeah, looking forward to what's next. Obviously, a lot up in the air at the moment with COVID-19 and everything. But yeah, very excited to continue the coaching journey. Been working on a few things in lockdown. You know, getting a few qualifications. I picked up a mentoring qualification now as well. Something that I'm quite keen to add to my bow. In terms of just say the big thing about coaching, I like helping players develop. I like improving them, that one-to-one time as well, just seeing things click and putting things together. So again, trying to make the most of the extra time at home to say, right, let me add a few strings to my bow so that I can come back a better coach and give back even more than I was doing previously.
Yeah, and you mentioned a couple of projects you've got working on there, Topsy. Is a career in the media also involved? I've seen you've been doing a bit for Channel 5 before the season stopped.
Yeah, again, something that I knew from a long time ago that I really enjoyed. So the plan was, you know, to make a really good go of it. Obviously, a tough industry to break into, but based on the work that I'd done, you know, everybody was really happy. Was able to, you know, do BT, do Channel 5, do some work with 5 Live as well. So make some really good progress with all the broadcasters. So fingers crossed that they still like me.
I'm sure they do.
Come August 15th when the games are back on, and yeah, you'll hear and see a lot more of me.
Well, I hope that's the case, Topsy, to hear you on BT Sport Channel 5 and BBC Radio 5 Live when Rugby hopefully does return in a month and a half time. Well, Topsy, it's been an absolute pleasure again to catch up with you, and thank you so much for being so open and honest about an issue which is so prominent at the moment in society. So thanks very much for your time, Topsy.
No worries, Chris. Thanks very much. Thanks for having me.
Thanks again to Topsy as well. And like I said before, TRU is firmly behind sort of the Black Lives Matter movement. So to be able to have conversations and play a tiny part in to help educate people about this is why it's so, so important. So great to catch up with Topsy again, and all the best to Topsy with his coaching work and his stuff for London Irish. But that's been another episode of TRU Talks. Hope you enjoyed.